Well, folks, we've got some nerfs coming to Hearthstone. So many people out there have been looking for changes, and there are 7 of them coming across standard and wild format. These will be landing on April 26th. That's really just a few days away. And I think some of you will be happy to see some of them, like this change to Pirate Warrior, for instance. It's getting nerfed. Secure the supplies, which is the final step of the quest line right before you get Rokara, will now require 3 pirates instead of 2. And this is a change we've seen in the past to the previous step of the quest line, and it was notable. It made an impact. Of course, Raid the Docks survived, as we've seen today, with the inclusion of a bunch of more early game pirates available in the latest expansion. The consistency of this deck just went through the roof. Because you have so many ways to make more pirates, dredge stuff, discover pirates, and so on. So this will just help slow it down that little bit, but I think the deck will remain plenty consistent with all those new options that exist, despite demanding 1 extra pirate. But this might do things like push Rokara back by a turn, which can push that Juggernaut win condition back by a turn, give opportunities for other decks to get in there and, enact their game plan, maybe stabilize behind a big wall of taunts if they're a Druid, or maybe just, aggro you down if you're a little bit faster deck playing against Pirate Warrior. So there are a little more opportunities. Now, I think Pirate Warrior will stay a relevant and good deck, particularly at lower ranks where it shines today. Pirate Warrior is already struggling at higher ranks. This will certainly make it struggle more, but I think it'll remain a consistent deck with a very reliable win condition in the Juggernaut coming down and just overwhelming your opponent. Doing that a little bit slower probably won't hurt this too much at lower ranks. It'll just pull a few percentage points off here and there. And I personally think that's a good thing. I don't think we want to go around murdering decks, because that's really tough for people who spent a bunch of dust. Remember, people don't just craft the card itself, they craft decks around it. So I think it's tough when you completely murder a deck people have come to rely on. But by pulling the win percentage down, hopefully that reduces the popularity. You're not seeing this absolutely everywhere on ladder as other decks maybe can rise in its place as it loses those percentage points. Maybe you get new tier 1 decks, and those become a little bit more popular and balance things out. I think that's the goal. There's one other change to Pirate Warrior coming, which I think will help reduce its power level even just a little bit more. And that's Puffer Fist. This is one we talked about, was in a ton of high-end decks. It was in like all the tier 1 Demon Hunter aggro decks, and it was in Pirate Warrior. And now Puffer Fist is going down to a 3/3. So we got this one right on the guess. And I think it's just a smart change. 4 health is a really sticky, annoying problem. This puts it in line with Cannoneer, a card that felt very similar in power level in a lot of ways, except this was neutral, so tons of decks were able to run it. And this just makes it that little bit easier to kill, a little more susceptible to value trades from other 3/4s, all of which will create those small incremental changes on board where other people can start to gain an advantage, or just not be completely overwhelmed by a bunch of Puffer Fists in particular. Anytime this came off like Drekthar and Aggro Demon Hunter, it's just like, oh my god, my board has been murdered by this effect. These things are so hard to deal with. It's so much health. All those little changes can start to add up. And since this is affecting 3 different decks, this is a pretty notable change, even though it might seem small in some ways from the stat change. Across the entire meta, that's a lot of small chances to add up together to be something meaningful. So I think this was a really, really solid choice. We've also got a change here to Switcheroo for a Switcheroo Priest, and this is one, that deck hasn't really taken off like I feared. It's remained a pretty low popularity, so I was going to be okay if Switcheroo didn't get changed, but this solution fixes the standard format side of the Switcheroo problem. It'll now swap health instead of stats, and on top of that, Switcheroo is also being banned in wild format, which we'll talk about a little more when we get to wild. But this is the standard side of the change, and it's a good one. It means, the Twin Fin deck is going to go away. I think this still remains an interesting card in standard format. Like, just drawing 2 minions for Priest can be handy. The health swap is still going to allow you to do some shenanigans if you want, because health can be manipulated by Priest pretty effectively with cards like Bless and so on. So having high health could still be an advantage of sorts. So this still feels flavorful and interesting for Priest, while removing some of the absolutely ridiculous shenanigans that were possible. We've also got Miracle Growth here going to 8 mana from 7. This is a sensible change. Ramp Druid's really good, and this certainly felt like one of the more powerful cards in the deck. Just being able to draw a bunch of stuff to keep the gears turning while also making like a 10-10 on board was a really effective game plan. And by pushing that back a turn, making it a bigger mana commitment overall, that is going to slow down Ramp Druid's stabilization quite a bit. It felt like this was the card that they really stabilized behind, really got safe behind. And if it takes them a turn longer to do that, if they can't squeeze other stuff in as easily alongside the Miracle Growth, that's definitely going to limit the deck's ability to go nuts. And I mean, these were also just big counter threats too. Like sometimes that 10-10 just started hit you in the face and it's like, oh my God, this is so much stuff for only a 7 mana card. I think 8 mana feels like a healthier spot for something like Miracle Growth. And we've also got a change here to Kazakhstan. Primarily, this will impact Druids at the moment, but this is a significant wording change here. So Kazakhstan, instead of having all minions in your deck be dragons for his effect, which also, of course, procced if you had 0 dragons in your deck, now you're actually going to have to be a dragon deck for Kazakhstan. His new battle cry reads, if you've played 4 other dragons this game, craft a custom deck of treasures. So Druids will no longer just be able to toss this in at the end of the deck and make it their win condition. They're actually going to have to commit some dragons. Like right now, you know, they run Onyxia or something, but they're going to need a little more if they want to make Kazakhstan work. Now, this does interestingly open up Kazakhstan to non-dragons being in your deck as well. Previously, if you were like a dragon priest and you wanted to play Kazakhstan, you had to be only dragons, because if you had any stragglers left in deck, Kazakhstan just wouldn't activate, and that would suck. But now, if you're something like a Dragon Priest, you could still run non-dragon minions. You could put that Xyrella in your deck if you want that awesome board clear. And Kazakhstan's still going to work based on this change, because you just have to have played 4 dragons. You don't have to have only dragons. So this actually becomes a buff in some scenarios, in some worlds, a nerf to Druid as it's being played specifically right now, which is important. That's awesome. Druid's really good. But in some ways, a buff that opens this card up for other strategies, which I think is kind of intriguing and interesting. I'm excited in a way to play Kazakhstan and other decks that are able to support that dragon stuff without, you know, forcing it all together. So Priest and Warrior probably come to mind first and foremost as opportunities there for Kazakhstan if they can run enough dragons to support him. So this is an interesting change. It's definitely more complex than we typically see, but hopefully an elegant and rewarding one nonetheless. So now let's move over to Wild format. As I teased earlier, Switcheroo is getting banned in Wild format. And that's a good change. I haven't played Wild, but from everything I've heard, Switcheroo doing crazy things in Wild was gross, with Stone Tusk Boars just murdering people, and swapping their health wasn't really going to help because of all the different ways to change that back into attack in Wild format. There's like Inner Fire and Reverso Switch or whatever that's called. There's like a million ways to make that still a really scary deck. So they're just going to get rid of Switcheroo altogether in Wild format. Now, sadly, there is a consequence of that. If you did craft this deck for Wild format, your Switcheroo is going to get refunded, but your Darkness that you're using to enable it will not be refunded. So, I mean, that's the hard part about nerfing cards and crafting things. Like I teased earlier, you know, when you craft a package and only one part of it gets nerfed, that's a economy consequence. I'll be honest, I don't feel too bad on this particular case because that was a pretty cheesy strategy, but still a downside of nerfing the common part of a combo instead of the legendary part. That said, I don't know if the Darkness deserved to die for Switcheroo's sins. Also for Wild format, though, this is the change I think a lot of people wanted and demanded and was ruining Wild format from what I could see. Kael'thas going back to 1 mana instead of 0 mana. Hey, sometimes they get things wrong. It was almost definitely a mistake to change Kael'thas back to 0. That just completely opened up turn 2 lethals and all these crazy things in Wild format that weren't even that crazy hard to pull off. One's going to limit that a little bit. The Druid that's utilizing it just needs more mana in that case to pop off super early, because 1 mana is actually quite a bit on turn 2 or 3, even when you're doing some mana cheat stuff, whereas 0 just gave you way too many opportunities. So I think this will put Kael'thas back in a healthy spot for Wild format. This is a obvious and excellent change as far as I'm concerned. So there you go. Those are the nerfs. Now, they didn't hit Demon Hunter other than through Pufferfist. Demon Hunter right now has like the best decks in the game, so I'm going to be really intrigued to see how Demon Hunter shakes out. Maybe they're expecting other things in the meta to rise up that are better against Demon Hunter. Maybe if Druids go away, Demon Hunter loses some win rate. alongside it if they're farming Druid. So it's going to be something to watch and see how all of this unfolds. But hopefully this puts the game in a better spot. I'm just happy to see some changes. It seemed like they were kind of lingering and lagging a little bit this expansion. So if these aren't enough, we'll see more. I think Pirates will still be solid, just not absolutely crazy. I think the Demon Hunters will still be at pretty good decks. Druid, I'm sure, will be fine. Druid always finds ways to survive. But if we can reshuffle a few percentage points of win rate here and there, that's often what you want from nerf. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on these. Do you think this is not enough? Did Pirate Warrior need a bigger nerf? I think a lot of people are going to say that. So I'm curious to read those thoughts and more in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.